I'm real excited about this opportunity to speak to you guys about this new and emerging technology that we know as drones. So a little bit about me. My name is Aaron Barnes. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I served from 2009 through 2017. Started out as a tactical satellite operator and ended up doing military intelligence, which, as you know, requires a bunch of drones. And from that, I got out of the military and decided that I really wanted to facilitate a business that was really centered around the capability of drones. So I started a small company here in town called Elusive View Cinematography, and I'd had great success doing small commercials and events. And eventually I was gifted enough to meet Mr. Dave Taylor through some of our endeavors together. And we recorded some really cool things together. So that'll cover pretty much the basis of who I am. And I'd like to deep dive right into the meat and the potatoes of what are drones. So we'll start with what people think drones are. So there's a bunch of different descriptions of what kind of drones that most people are familiar with. And that's something that you would see like this system right here. This is a pretty standard system. This is made by DJI Incorporated. It's a phantom system. It's a multi-rotor. So these flying camera jigs, if you will, are pretty capable and have changed quite a bit over the time that I've been operating them. We started early 2014 when they first came out, and they have improved leaps and bounds. So when they first came out, battery life really wasn't that great. You had about 7 minutes before it kind of fell out of the sky, and it got a little bit ridiculous. After that, onboard avionics and accident avoidance systems had started to take hold. The engineers and I had worked together over at DJI, making several vast improvements to the platform. Now, DJI is the #1 drone facility in the world, and they make, I want to say, something between 15 and 25 different assemblages for all different applications. So we're going to jump into the different applications that drones are used for. So obviously the #1 most common civilian application for drones is photography and videography. But some of the lesser ones that really aren't talked about are search and rescue, agriculture, a lot in the film industry. And even beyond that, they're starting to use them to make deliveries. And I know everybody's kind of excited about that. And they're not really sure if it's going to be safe, it's going to be awesome. I know Amazon.com had put out several patents. UPS was very interested in what they were going to be able to do with that application. So let's see here if I can get some screen sharing going on. And I'll give you guys just a rough example here. I don't have any audio on it, but I'm going to go ahead and share it. So this is a 4K render of just a really pretty site where one of the basic drone systems is used where they're doing site mapping. And if you can see where they're using the panning and the jig capability just to see where the ocean line is, they use these for all kinds of agriculture applications, as well as marine biology. Specifically in this video, you'll annotate what they're doing is looking for marine life. And if you ever get a chance, you go on youtube.com. This is where I'm actually just, streaming this video from. This is actually a feed that you can find on a 4K video. Just to give you a brief example, if you've never experienced what drones are capable of. So this one's shot with a Phantom 4. It's capable in sport mode of flying up to about 65 miles per hour. It is equipped with built-in avionics. This gives it unparalleled performance compared to a lot of the other assemblages. It's equipped with a 4K camera. It's 12 megapixel. Its density range and optics are fantastic. As you can see, the color shading has changed in gradient, and it's actually automatic, which is really cool. So when drones first came out, they really were not user-friendly. And it wasn't until the last couple of years where DJI had innovations where they were working with creators like ourselves to build a system that pretty much anybody can use. When they first came out, they were built similarly to those 3D robotic helicopters, and you really had to know what you were doing. they were almost 100% analog operation. So if you didn't know what you were doing on a multi-rotor course, it was very likely that you would crash. Now they're equipped with GPS sensors. They use GLONASS sensors, and that automatically stabilizes the camera. It stabilizes in wind, and it's even capable of flying and recording specific targets that are tracked by a GPS transmitter. Skip ahead here to the coastline. And you can see the gradient as it changes from color. It's very rich in detail. Now, again, when these things first came out, we were attaching GoPro Hero 2s to them, and obviously those were shot in a wide angle, 170-degree field of view. And I think they found out pretty quickly that people really did not like that forced field of view angle, and it almost made people sick. So they had changed up the focal points to really get all of the detail as much as they could. And as photographers, I know a lot of you guys are very, very interested on the capability and range of these sensors. So let's go ahead and we'll stop here. And we're going to go ahead and jump back into go to the whole wide screen here. I'll share everything so you can kind of see it. So I wanted to talk about, after we talked about the drones and what they're really used for, it comes to now there are two different operators that you can choose to be. You can do this commercially, or you can choose to go right back to, let's see here. Do you guys see me okay?
Yes.
All right. So over here is next to my rig. I hope this isn't too distracting. Let me go ahead and turn off these lights for you because it's a bit much going on back there. Anyway, where were we? We were talking about how it really started out as a grassroots idea that you could build these systems and you could fly them pretty much wherever you wanted, up until a few years ago when the FAA had gotten involved and they started to say, well, if you're going to operate a drone, you need to have some type of licensing. There needs to be rules and regulations. So over time, slowly, and I really emphasize slowly, the FAA had asked for requirements from drone operators and what they thought might make it safer. And they came up with a couple of guidelines. Number one is they wanted you to not fly in places that were almost imminent danger. So we're talking about restricted fly zones for pretty much any aircraft, even if it wasn't a drone. So you typically cannot fly within 5 miles of an airport, hospitals, disaster zones. And if you were to fly in these areas, they have made it so it's possible now, but you require special authorization from whichever authority in that location is capable of giving you. So now, as a drone hobbyist / enthusiast, you can fly a drone pretty much in one of these areas safely, avoiding all of the things that really create issues. So operating as an enthusiast, there are a couple of key rules. One, you have to fly within line of sight. You have to be able to see the craft visually. They want to make sure that you're not flying over people or creating a dangerous environment for wildlife or hazardous for people specifically. And they wanted to make sure that you had a basic understanding of flight telemetry. So as it went on, for a while, they wanted you to try and call into aircraft control towers and try and get authorization to fly near airports or places that might have imminent danger flight areas. And eventually it came across that legislation had required people to get to start registering their drones. So if you went to FAA.gov, they had a whole list of requirements for people that wanted to do this commercially. So it really came out to, when you're going to do it commercially, there's a couple of things that you need to understand. First of all, they want you to be able to register your drone. Second of all, they want you to be able to be competent. So part of this, just like any other profession, requires a license. Now, part of this licensure is through FAA. It's called the Part 107. And it typically requires a course that you can take online, and then there's a test that comes after that. And once you pass that and you're granted your Part 107, you can fly commercially within the set parameters. Now things are slightly changing, and they're getting a little bit more lenient because they understand that the sensors are getting more reliable. Now you can capably fly a unit over people in some instances, as long as you're Part 107 authorized and you do carry insurance. Again, it does carry a fair amount of liability if your structure does fall out of the sky and hurt somebody. Now that covers real basic what you need to know. Now, coming up soon, the FAA has put out a couple of changes. Within the next 30 months, it will be a law. They were requiring every drone operator to have a standard remote identification digital tag. And what that means is basically a small transmitter that is either built into the system or additionally added to older systems that just says, hey, this is me. I'm operating here in this location. I belong to this person, and it's attached to this person's drone license. Now, drone remote identification can be ran through radio frequency. It can be ran through Wi-Fi. It can be ran through Bluetooth. We're not quite there yet. They're still working on it. Now, they also have FAA recognized identification areas for the older assemblages that do not have these transmitters just yet. And right now, FAA is working on standardizing these areas. And if you're looking for further information, I'll go ahead and share it here, where I'm actually referencing this information from. You can go right to faa.gov/UAS. And right here, it states all the things that I just really covered, remote identification, the final rule, when it's actually going to be enacted. And they went over a long period of time asking different drone operators what they thought would make it better. Here we are talking about limited visual sight operations from takeoff and shutdown, drone broadcast, remote identification. So each one of these assemblies, these drones, I call them sensors, produce a unique identifier. And you can see where I have it right here. It would say the drone ID, drone location, altitude, the drone velocity, takeoff location, and elevation and time mark. Now, this is really just formalities until it becomes law. As you can see here, it's going to be 18 months after the rule's effective date. This is going to be coming up in about 60 days. So they're really trying to push for these laws to be pushed and enacted. Right now, it's kind of the wild, wild west, and they really weren't sure how they were going to control people and make it so that way it was something that they could do without too much requirements. So let me go ahead and share some other things. So I mentioned that I worked as a systems engineer with a couple of these different companies, building and designing some of these different drones. And if you ever get a chance, you can go over to DJI's website, which let me go ahead and share that screen for you. And we can talk about some of the exciting capabilities of the new drones. So we'll come over here and we'll share this, and I'll show you some of the enterprise capabilities of these newer drones. So we're going to go ahead and share the whole board here, and I'll go ahead and make it large format. All right, so this is one of DJI's latest drones, and this is designed for their Enterprise Advanced. This drone is capable of tracking thermal imaging, FLIR, forward-looking infrared. It also has capabilities of shooting 48 megapixel visual camera, 32 digital zoom, omnidirectional obstacle sensing. And this is all available if you want to check it out. It's on their new Mavic 2 Enterprise. So you can see where it's really coming to, the technology is expanding. This is a thermal image. So this could be super beneficial for anybody that owns a construction company, anybody that works in the pipeline industry. Thermal capabilities are great because I mentioned that they use these for agricultural uses. And let me give you an example. So imagine in the not too distant future that we have a farmer who wants to know where his issues in his crop are. Using one of these advanced sensors, they would be able to see different heat signatures throughout the crop and be able to determine with pinpoint accuracy with a GPS grid location of where that issue is, and they would be able to directly rectify it. Versus back in the older days where they had to fly a crop duster over, introduce chemicals, and then there was an intervention between them and the pest. The same thing, retrospectively, they'd be using these machines to inspect safely these structures here with crazy capability. So this actually has 4K or 4 times lossless zoom, which means that the sensor on these cameras is incredible. You'd be able to look all the way into fine details of bridges and let's say water structures. You'd be able to see all of these issues. So in corporate America has almost endless possibilities. I think I forgot to mention that a lot of the civilian drones are capped at 400 feet maximum flight ceiling before they're digitally locked, which means that the FAA and DJI are working very closely with each other to make sure that people aren't flying above the predicted airspace that they should be operating in. But I just wanted to show you guys that how rapidly these systems are changing, all of the different capabilities that they have now. And we're going to go ahead and stop sharing this screen. So we covered application. We covered that they can use it for search and rescue. They even use it for movies. David Taylor and I actually had used it for a couple of different events, including the Sarasota Chalk Festival. We had filmed at one point. I was lucky enough to be able to film the International Dragon Boat Festival, which is something that is up until recently not hosted in our country. It was actually right over here at Benderson Park in Sarasota. Let me see if I can go ahead and pull something up for that. Let me share this screen so you can see just some of the still shots that I took of different things. Okay, so this is actually from my business Facebook page. These are different things that I shot just around the city. Most of you are familiar with Marina Jax. Marina Jax is local here. It's kind of its own spellbinding location. People love it. And these are just some really basic demonstrations of what the Phantom 3 and Phantom 4 are capable of. This actually is a shot of the Sarasota County Fair a couple years ago. This was before pre-COVID. This is the Ringling Bridge coming into the city, and this is I think this is my Phantom 2. So as you can tell, the camera imagery at night wasn't that great, but it did improve. This is Siesta Key Beach. And this is where they're actually working on trying to build that traffic circle coming up in downtown. This is South Beach, Miami. And there's our beloved statue that they just recently moved, the unconditional surrender. This is where they had just recently renovated most of Siesta Key Beach. This is a few years ago when they were just starting the process. And here's a picture of the famed International Dragon Boat Festival. All of these women that actually participated are from, I think it was 35 different countries, and all of them are either continuously fighting the battle of breast cancer or supporting somebody who does. And this was all captured from a drone for the first time in US history. And I was proud to be one of those prolific drone photographers to actually have the opportunity to do so. And this is right before they started digging up for the west end that they just completed. All right, so we got all of that. And we're gonna go ahead and continue. So I've a lot of time coverage of the different assemblies that I have. I've worked on several of the different assemblies. So I've worked on the Phantom 3, the Phantom 2, the Inspire 1, which is a folding airframe system, also known as the T600. I covered FAA requirements and commercial use for the Part 107 and beginning of regulation and registration. So that pretty much sums up most of the presentation that I had, and I left some time for questions and answers.
Aaron, I have a question about liability.
Okay.
Does each drone operator have to get their own liability insurance?
Well, if you're operating commercially in a place where you have a license, it only makes sense for you to carry a liability insurance. A lot of times there are insurance companies that will cover you for events, and you can get event insurance. So my answer is very simply yes.
Okay. There's a question on chat from Richard Duckworth. Can you fly a drone in national parks?
So currently, national parks are prohibited from flying drones, mostly because, and this is what they say, they don't want you to interrupt the natural wildlife that lives there. It looks like Harold's got a question. He says, you mentioned commercial users. Is there a non-commercial user class? Yes. So you have commercial and then you have enthusiast. And enthusiast is not bound by the same laws and regulations per se. Like I said, it started out as the wild, wild west. You know, you can pretty much fly in most places as long as the drone will let you. A lot of these newer drones, like I said, have electronic safety lockout features for restricted flight areas. So if you were to take one of these newer drones and let's say you were to take it over to Benderson Park, you would be able to put it on the box and it would tell you if you're in a restricted flight area or not. And if you are in a restricted area, it won't even take off. But yes, there is restriction on what you can do as far as just a regular enthusiast. Looks like there's another question here from Carol. It says, is there a such thing as an underwater drone? Yes, there is. So they don't call them drones when they're underwater. They call them ROVs, or remotely operated vehicles. And there's actually a really interesting documentary about how they used it to investigate some of the sunken ships, more specifically the Titanic. But you can check that all out. They do have it on YouTube. It is really cool.
Aaron, what are the liabilities of your insurance policies? What are the numbers for liability?
So typically and again, if you're going to do this in a commercial basis, I always carried up to $1 million liability insurance just in case, let's say the absolute worst should happen. You know, the aircraft should fail and fall out of the sky and hit somebody and cause catastrophic injury. That is a possibility, however, highly unlikely. So I always carried up to $1 million coverage just for the event. And it actually, you know, I know that number sounds like a lot, but really, if you consider the things that could happen, let's say that you fly near an extreme electromagnetic pulse, which is generated by a lot of the equipment that we operate around all the time. Power lines have step-down transformers that create magnetic fields. And these magnetic fields often will tamper with onboard avionics. So the onboard avionics can disrupt and cause it to fly out of bounds, can cause it to forget where home destination location is. So yeah, insurance is pretty important if you're going to do it commercially. Now, as an enthusiast, I think if you're just going to go out to the, you know, a local park and fly it around and get some cool pictures, it's not really a big deal.
That said, you could hit somebody and then be personally on the hook.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, just like, you know, when you're driving your car, if you were to hit somebody, you're personally on the hook. We got a question from Nino to everybody. Do the drones automatically return home when the batteries are low? So when the drones first came out, it was a feature that they were talking about. Now, every single drone that comes out, to my knowledge, in this class of drone does do that. I know that all of the DJI products that I helped design do that. So they all calculate in real time how far you fly away. And most of them have what is called a point of no return. And I know that sounds really grim, but it calculates how far away it can fly before it runs out of battery, and it will stop and let you know you're going to fly too far and you're going to run out of battery. So the drone autonomously will fly back by itself and land. And it's something they've really been working on to get better at. When they first came out, they were not that great. You would fly them out and you get to a certain distance and it would say, oh, maybe it's time to fly back. And then the battery would die and it wouldn't exactly fall out of the sky, but it would slowly hover down and land sometimes in a lake. These things are not waterproof. At least these current generations are not. What are the price ranges of entry-level drones? So let's talk about that. When we first started building drones, the Phantom series was well over $2,000. This is not the case anymore. They have become so incumbent on our entire network of people that they sell them starting at around $700, and they're fantastic. So we got from Harold that says, I heard that the US government has declared DJI products, Chinese technology should be banned for the US use. So because they're Chinese electronics doesn't necessarily mean that they are a threat specifically to US government. Most of the time it's just because everything is manufactured in China. The chipsets are manufactured in China. DJI actually has a Department of California where they make all the designs. And there are a lot of other questions. So somebody said, can you rent a drone for a day or more? Yes, you can. There are actually places right here in town that through the internet, I'm not going to throw some websites out there. I'd like for you to do your own research and, really decide what price range you're looking for. Because we're talking everything from regular Phantom, $700 drone all the way up to some of these professional rigs that are $35,000 and carry full-size cinema equipment, and they are very expensive. And a lot of times they ask that you pay like an upfront down payment just in case you should have an incidental failure. But yes, absolutely, you can rent a drone for a day or more. So Frank asks, Homeland Security prohibits DJI, Department of Commerce, blacklisted DJI, and Department of Justice banned all DJI purchases. Department of Interior eliminated all DJI drones. That is not true. So the Department of Homeland Security talked about DJI possibly being the leak of foreign intelligence, which they did an internal investigation and found that not to be true. The Department of Justice talked about banning DJI purchases when President Trump was in office because they thought that it could be a possible leak of viable information. Being somebody that has worked in military intelligence, I can tell you that pretty much anything that you can imagine that can spy on you will spy on you, regardless of who is operating it or not. So all of these information devices collect information all the time. Every one of these drones collect information about where they're at in real time. They use GPS and GLONASS sensors, and they also use radio frequency. More or less, your phone that is attached to these drones collects more information about you than the drone does. So, and if you really thought about what kind of information these drones could extract, right? Maybe we're talking about flying around military bases. This is something that is heavily prohibited. Flying near secured facilities, heavily prohibited. So DJI has worked very closely with the US government to build a, we'll call it a blacklist flight area, a registered no-fly zone, and for obvious reasons, just in case you were worried about those kinds of things. Drone Life Editor-in-Chief, all true. Well, I'd have to do further research to see that for myself. I'm not discounting it at all. I absolutely believe it could be true, but up until this point, I haven't seen it. Do we have more questions?
Besides yourself, Dave Taylor, and Frank Conarazzo, is there anyone else out there who is flying a drone right now? No responses, so I'm guessing no.
Well, then maybe we could talk about where you can.
I got a hand raised from Mark Bagwell, one of our guests, and I know that He hasn't joined us yet, but Phil Picott is definitely a drone pilot. So, all right, just
Hello, I just unmuted myself. I was figuring out the phone here, so.
Okay, here we go. We can hear you.
oh, Phil, hey, how are you?
I'm well. I apologize. I just walked in, was taking dear old mom to get her COVID shot, so.
Yay.
But she's able to kiss anyone she wants.
Well, that's good. I'm
But,
glad to hear that she's
Take her
well.
up on that next time I see her.
Thank you.
So we got Phil,
Yeah,
Frank, Jay,
Particular.
Mark. That's about four. Oh, wait, I know Bob Bolsick has a drone, but he doesn't particularly fly it. But he's got the lower level one. So
Okay, it looks like Richard's got a question. The question is, how are photos saved? Is there a memory card? So yes, on the smaller systems like this, they have a micro SD card that actually slides right into the camera assembly, and they're saved in MP4 format. And you can actually change what kind of format you'd like to save it in. For example, if you use Mac versus PC, you can save the file format in MOV, which is very easily transmutable from your DJI drone directly to your MacBook. As far as specifics, the still frames can be shot in either JPEG or RAW. They can also be shot in both formats at the same time, which is really convenient. And they're actually working on these other newer drones that actually have solid state drives built into the camera assembly. And this is for the really expensive systems that you probably won't get a chance to play with too much. It says you are required to get a Part 107 operational waiver for flying over people, all commercial work. Yes, that is absolutely true. You are required to get a Part 107 operational waiver for flying over people and all commercial work. Yes, that is true. What product would you recommend for the first time enthusiast? And this is from Harold. So I am very fond of the Phantom series. They're very affordable, and there's a lot of things that you can do with these. They actually just came out with a smaller version. The Mavic Air is a small civilian use drone. I think it's about 250 grams, and it gets pretty good flight time, and it's very easy to fly. So those would be the two things that I would suggest when you're first starting out. If it's something, you want something that has enough avionics that will help you fly. It will help you keep from running out of battery or having mistakes. So one thing that I did cover is that these things all, the newer ones have avoidance issues, right? So if you can see this here, this is the Phantom 3 Pro. And on the bottom of this specific unit was one of the very first applications of what was called the vision positioning sensor. So it has two sonar sensors that are in tandem and one imaging camera on the bottom. And what that's for is if you fly into a place where you lose GPS signal, it'll use these sensors on the bottom to track the ground to keep it in the same location. So let's say you're outside and you're flying and you end up maybe underneath a garage cover and you're trying to get some low shots. Previous editions of this unit were not so good at dealing with that transition of sensor usage. Now they've gotten much better. So for people that are looking for their first time flights, I would suggest the new Mavic systems because they have a lot more avionics and accident avoidance software. They have more sensors on board that will keep you from flying into things. And they're not 100% every single time, but they do work 90% of the time up until this point.
I got a question here.
I have a question. This is Phil Picott. I just recently purchased a pair of the Epson BT 35T virtual reality or augmented virtual reality glasses for the drone. Are you familiar with them, and have any tips as to how we can better use them?
So that specific system is designed, and for people who don't know, what it does is it takes the cameras on the drone and it projects them onto a screen that you wear on your face. And these specific pair of augmented goggles that he's referring to have motion trackers built into the head unit. So when you turn your head, it translates that information to the drone, and it makes the yaw control on the specific camera assembly mimic your head movement. So as far as I would say, if it's something that you're experimenting with for the first time, I would find a very large open field with no objects in sight. And I would test around at low speeds and really become familiar with that operation. Now, me personally, I don't like the augmented glasses because when you're flying at a high rate of speed, it creates nausea for some people. And for somebody who's just starting out, maybe not the best plan, but it is a really cool option.
Can I ask? I've got two questions actually. The first is for people that will hear a lot about when you have to register your drone. If it's a certain weight, can you just address that, please, Aaron? When
Absolutely.
It's weight, it has to be registered under a certain weight. It doesn't, and how that. And then I have a question after, please.
So for a while, they were talking about when it first started out, the FAA had rolled out a series of regulations for registration. Registration costed $5. It was on the website, and it was regulated for any drone that weighed more than 250 grams. And I'm not sure where they came up with that number, but that was the number that they chose. There are a couple of drones made by DJI in their lineup that specifically the Mavic Air fits under that category for 250 grams. You don't have to register it. You can fly it in most places. And it does have all the built-in avionics, and it does have the tracking. And then the last question you said was?
Thank you. The other one was touching upon a really fascinating point you made earlier, where either it's technology that's being developed or perhaps it already exists, I'm not quite sure. But when you get above a certain height, like the 400 feet AGL, then the drone, you said something about canceling. Well, what happens to the flying of the drone? Is it just a signal that's canceled for image taking? Because surely the drone mustn't fall, just fall down.
Basically what it does is it doesn't shut the drone off or anything like that. For DJI drones, because that's what I use specifically, it's like a digital fence, right? So once you get to that point, it just stops. And then it says you're reaching the digital leash, right? So it brings the drone back to where you are. And if you keep trying to do it like 2-3 times, it just automatically returns from takeoff location and lands. So it's not like the drone just stops taking pictures.
And does that exist in, like, we just got a Mavic Pro?
It does. It exists in the Mavic Pro.
So if the drone ever starts coming back at us, that could be a sign that maybe we've been neglectful about a place we should be, or.
So yes. Actually, it's really cool with the new Mavic Pros. If you, when you first started up on the software, the DJI Go app, the DJI Go app has a couple of different features. One that I really enjoy, if you've never flown a drone before, they're really expensive, and you're really I really don't want to crash this thing out of the sky. It costs too much money. So they have a built-in flight simulator on the app. And you turn on the drone, and the drone mimics what it would do in real time, but it doesn't ever leave the ground. So it's really cool if you're learning for the first time. It's kind of like Microsoft Flight Simulator, and you can simulate all kinds of conditions. So if there's wind, or maybe you're in an incumbent area where it has low signal, you can simulate all of these things. And I recommend to any new pilot, for any reason whatsoever, before you take a drone off, maybe fly around in the simulator for about 2 hours.
I love it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Answer.
So from Bob asks, what are the typical battery life of the new drones? So let's talk about this. Battery technology has surpassed everything that we know to this point. All of the DJI drones are equipped with what's called a lithium polymer drive battery. These batteries are 12.5 volts. In specific size, they are 4480 milliamp hour. Now, this is an old battery. These charge in about 20 minutes. Flight time, typically, if you're flying carefully, you can get almost 27 minutes of flight time. Now, the new Mavic Pros, they're talking about possibility of 30 minutes or longer. And again, it's 100% about the environment in which you're flying. If it's really windy that day, and that's something I really appreciate about the DJI drones, is that because they have so many sensors on board, right? Like I said before, when they first came out, they didn't really have any built-in electronics to help you fly. So if it got windy, it just floated away. Or you know, if you didn't know how to what's the word I'm looking for? Make critical adjustments in zero time travel, you're going to lose that drone, or it's going to get damaged or fall into water or something terrible. The new drones really fly themselves pretty much. You know, the joysticks are pretty much to tell it. And I'll show you here real simply. So this is the controller that comes with the Phantom. So it has a mount for your smartphone or your tablet, and it controls through the app. So you plug it in directly into this controller. So right here is the on button. Here is the return to home button. When you first take off, there are a number of things that happen with these drones. So first thing is they find up to 20 satellites at the time. Each one of these satellites dictates where it is located on the ground. So global positioning sensor, and that's backed by radio frequency as well. So this specific system can fly up to, and we're talking raw capability, I would never do this, but you could fly it roughly 2 kilometers away. And that's really incredible. Now, the one we were just looking on the DJI website talks about having a 10-kilometer digital transmission distance. And we're talking that's for commercial application and other capabilities. But these things have really improved in capability. So these ones actually, real simply, so this one here is to, you can see it, that is to either start taking a picture, or you can control the yaw, the movement of the camera up and down. And then on the opposite side is the pitch control, which is left and right. So just like if you were operating, let's imagine drones as a very simple camera jig. And everybody's pretty familiar with like a tripod. So when you have a camera and you're looking at it left to right, or you're making that adjustment up and down, these cameras have the capability of doing this all remotely. And now the way that they can do this, they have a number of different programs. So this one specifically, let's say you were looking at something, right? You found a tree that you thought was just absolutely gorgeous, and you wanted to capture all of the imagery all the way around that tree. This has what's called a point of interest mode, or POI. And you can lock on to that specific target and fly around it at your own mitigated speed. You can choose how fast it does this. And the machine picks up the distance from the tree or whatever the object is and slowly rotates it around, so you can get beautiful, gyroscopically stabilized imagery. These new drones actually feature something called Follow Me, which is a new feature that came out, I want to say 2-3 years ago. And they use it heavily in the film industry. So I always thought this was a really kind of cheesy thing, but it uses your phone as a digital transmitter, and it tracks that frequency. So let's say if you were riding a motorcycle or you're in a car, these drones could follow you, and you could designate using these different sensors, because they're really smart now. Using these sensors on the bottom, it would tell the drone if it was flying over branches or if it was too close to the ground, because not all terrain is the same. So as this is following you, it would pick up the changes in terrain. So let's say you started riding your motorcycle uphill or your bicycle uphill, it would make that adjustment for you and continue to follow you. And these are just some of the very basic control programs that are built in.
Interesting.
And let's see, Frank wants to know, why keep supporting China? No other USA-made drones. Of course, they are teal moda. You know, I agree. Unfortunately, right now, with the way that the world is running, everything is made in either Silicon Valley or China. The government makes a number of drones that are American-made, but they are not for regular people to use. maybe in the near future we could get something that's American made. Actually, let me pause and take a step back. 3 years ago, there was a company called 3D Robotics, and 3D Robotics made an American made drone. The problem with it is that it couldn't compete with the DJI drones, and it went out of business shortly after. But they did make some really great drones. Unfortunately, they went out of business because not everybody was interested in the 3DR drones. But I think just like everything in America, I think that the drive for innovation should drive what the next system platform should be like. I think if we, just like everything else in America, we bring the best of everything from everywhere. And we challenge the way we think, and we design things based on that premise that we can make it better. So I would love to see, and right now, there are MIT students working on it right now as we speak. Ironically, you should mention that. Right now, as we speak, they are making drones that are American made. They're made by Intel, and they program them to do things autonomously. One of these is search and rescue. So again, it uses the FLIR camera. Let's say you went snow skiing, and unfortunately enough, something happened and there was an avalanche or something bad happened and you got trapped in the snow. Now, the time it might take for them to find you with the dogs might not be soon enough. But Intel had designed a couple of these drones to fly out in fleets and find somebody in less than 10 minutes using their infrared heat signatures. So the technology is really expanding rapidly. Soon enough, I think there will be another American-made drone manufacturer.
Great job, Aaron. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate you guys taking the time to reach out.
It was really great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. Scott, we are recording this, right?
That's correct.
All right. Just wanted to double check. So, Aaron, we'll get you a link to that video when it's available as well.
Wonderful. I appreciate it.
And that's about it. I think, hope you guys are out there having fun. I know I am. So,
well, one last thing before everybody goes. If you ever have any questions, they have my email. If you ever want a one-on-one for some of the guys that have drones and they're looking to improve their technique, feel free to reach out to Dave Taylor and have him contact me, and we can set up something.
Yes. Great.
Thank you, Aaron.
That would be great.
Absolutely.
all right.
Vin,
Sir.
it's Rob. Hi. One thing that I'd like to see is if people in our club are using these to do videos and photos, to have them share them one night and just share what they've got. It'd be kind of fun.
That is the plan.
Oh, you're going to do that, Dave?
Yeah, I'd like to do that. I'd like to be able to bring in, I mean, there's a couple of members out there that are shooting with them, and I'd like to kind of meet with them in a focus group and talk about making a presentation, maybe one time on a competition night or something, and just look at drone shots and look at videos that we've done.
Yeah, or even just a sharing night and stuff. It would, because of our son-in-law is a pilot, and he has a friend of his who's a pilot for Japan Airlines with his wife, and they have a drone, and they've been on a boat because they're not flying much with one of these drones, and I'm friends with them on Facebook, never met them, just to look at the pictures.
Neat.
That kind of goes along with an idea that's been percolating in my head, and I really like that idea of either drone photos or drone videos. So Dave and you and I will talk, and
Okay.
Kim, you got to remind them that he said yes. So
I will. I promise. I'm very interested in it too. So you got my word.
okay. Anything else?
I appreciate everybody taking the time to coming and listen to me speak. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for being here. Thanks, everybody. Drive safely, go home straight home.